So Chris Eubank Jr. gets revenge over Liam Smith with a completely one-sided 10th round TKO victory. Eubank looked far more focused, far more confident, and far more happy during the ring walk for this rematch than he did for the first fight, which to me was very impressive considering what happened last time. Coming off a devastating knockout defeat like that, most fighters will have demons and be nervous going into the rematch. But with Eubank, there was none of that. In many of the videos I made since the first fight, I talked about the strategy Eubank would need to employ to win the rematch. Not that I thought he would win, and I'll come on to that in a moment, but Liam Smith has always been a guy who's relatively inactive in the middle of the ring, especially when he's fighting someone who's taller and or faster than him. He'll try to maneuver you to the ropes or into a corner before he opens up. And that's where he caught Eubank in the first fight, obviously. So my thinking all along was Eubank needs to keep the fight in the middle of the ring on the end of a jab. And if Smith manages to get past his jab, he needs to tie him up. Don't do all that shoulder roll stuff that got him caught last time. Just keep it simple, tie him up, and push him back to the middle of the ring. However, I didn't think that strategy alone would be enough to get him the win. I thought that Liam Smith would be more confident going into the rematch, knowing he had the power to knock Eubank out and would therefore be more aggressive. And that would ultimately yield success. In order to counter that, I thought Eubank would need to hurt Smith relatively early in the fight in order to tame that aggression and allow himself the kind of time and space that's necessary to outbox him. And while I never doubted that Eubank had the power to hurt Smith if he landed enough clean shots, Smith has a very tight guard. So in order to get through it, you're going to need to stand your ground and open up with 4, 5, 6 shots. I doubted whether Eubank would have the confidence to do that coming off the first fight, but it turns out that he did. In the first couple rounds, Eubank established the strategy of keeping the fight in the middle of the ring, keeping his hands up and utilizing the clinch. That frustrated Smith because, again, he's a fighter who typically doesn't like to open up until he gets you on the ropes. In the third round, Eubank started bringing his combinations into play. Smith did try to punch with him a couple times, but he didn't quite get the timing right. And in the fourth round, Eubank dropped Smith with a right uppercut. And that was effectively the end of the fight. He shut down Smith's offense by keeping the fight in the middle of the ring, and he dropped and hurt him, which tamed his aggression. The rest of the fight was basically target practice. Now, Smith did roll his ankle in round 2, but we're not going to use that as an excuse because according to Smith himself and Natasha Jonas, Smith always does that, even in sparring. It's just a habit he has. A very strange habit, bizarre in fact, because you're obviously opening yourself up to a bad injury doing that. But as I say, it's apparently something he regularly does, so we're not going to use that as an excuse. What I will say, however, is after the knockdown and the follow-up from Eubank, the condition of Smith's right ankle seemed to deteriorate. If you have a habit of rolling your ankles anyway, then you're suddenly in a battle for survival where your opponent's raining down punches on you, that's obviously going to increase the risk of injury even more. So if Smith's right ankle was injured, I think it occurred after the knockdown, and Eubank was already in full control of the fight by that point anyway. Now, some people might criticize Eubank for not ending the fight earlier, but Smith's head movement when he's in survival mode is actually pretty good. Eubank nearly punched himself out the first time he went for the finish because Smith was making him miss. So it was actually sensible for Eubank to try and break him down a bit more and sap his strength before going in for the finish again. And that's what he did do in the 10th round. But again, Smith's head movement was good and not much of Eubank was actually landing clean. But the fight was completely one-sided by that point and Smith just wasn't punching back. So you can't have too many complaints with a referee for stopping it. I think that Smith was far too cocky going into this rematch, far too complacent. He claims to have gained something like 42 pounds after sustaining a back injury that postponed the fight, inferring that losing all that weight left him drained. That shows a staggering lack of discipline. Again, it's as if he genuinely thought the rematch would be easy. At the weigh-in, you guys may have noticed, he continued to stare Eubank down long after Eubank had broken off and looked away. I always have to question when fighters do stuff like that in these circumstances because you already knocked him out in the first fight. He knows what you're capable of. You don't need to try and intimidate him. The experience of getting knocked out was intimidating enough. Your focus should be on what you're going to do in the ring, anticipating the adjustments Eubank might make. You think that all you need to do is just stare at him and he's going to crumble? It reminded me of the Lennox Lewis-Hasim Rahman rematch where Rahman was doing all that type of stuff, clowning Lewis in the TV studio when they got into that brawl. And on the actual night of the fight, he went to Lewis's dressing room and started banging on the door, demanding to be let in. Again, trying to intimidate him. And while he was wasting all this time and energy on these silly antics, Lewis was focusing on the actual fight, which is what Rahman should have been doing. Same thing here with Liam Smith. He was so overconfident and complacent that he thought he could gain a load of weight after the first fight, make no improvements at all, and just focusing on winning a few stare downs and that would be enough. Thinking he could terrify Eubank to such an extent that he would just fall over as soon as he got hit with a first jab. You can't rely on that. Smith's focus was totally in the wrong place. Again, you already knocked Eubank out. You don't need to try and intimidate him. Focus on being in shape and perfecting your strategy in the ring. Not that any of this would have changed the result, but losing 42 pounds is obviously not going to help you. To me, it's a lesson in boxing psychology that fighters can learn. Never underestimate anyone, even a guy who you've just knocked out. You need to stay disciplined and be professional. And the roles were literally reversed in that sense from the first fight where it was Eubank who was complacent. Now, a lot of people are praising Bomac, saying that Eubank has finally found a perfect trainer. Well, he only spent 4 weeks with Bomac apparently, so I'm not going to jump to that conclusion just yet. We all knew the adjustments Eubank needed to make for the rematch. Stay off the ropes and keep your hands up. It's not exactly rocket science. By far the most impressive thing for me about Eubank's performance was his mindset. And I don't know how much Bomac actually had to do with that. I'm not saying he had nothing to do with it. I'm saying I don't know because he's only been with him for a few weeks. If Eubank stays with Bomac moving forward, I want to see how he performs in his next few fights. Then we'll get a better idea of how much impact he's actually had on him. Again, Bomac's a great trainer, and he might be the perfect guy for Eubank. I just want to see a bit more before I'm totally convinced. Now, moving forward, Eubank called a bunch of people out post-fight, Conor Benn, Kell Brook, and Gennady Golovkin. He said he wanted to get his hands on one of Golovkin's belts. Well, Golovkin doesn't actually have any belts. I guess Eubank didn't get the memo. But he should be able to get a title shot against one of the champions quite easily, if he wants one, because he's a draw. In fact, Eubank's actually a bigger draw than any of the champions at middleweight, other than possibly Jamal Charlo. But he might look at Conor Benn and Kell Brook as lower risk and higher reward, and therefore prioritize those fights over a title shot. Personally, I'm not too enthused by either of those fights. I'd rather see Eubank fight actual middleweights. And Ben still hasn't resolved this UCAT situation. There hasn't been a hearing. He has not been exonerated. The provisional suspension was only lifted on a technicality over jurisdiction, which is why UCAT have lodged an appeal. I don't think Conor Benn belongs in a boxing ring until he's actually had a hearing and cleared his name properly or served an appropriate ban. I can't think of any fighter who failed a drug test then returned to the ring without having a hearing. Now, we can complain about the leniency of the punishment that certain fighters have received, but they at least went through due process. Conor Benn and his team are still doing everything in their power to avoid due process. And Ben's attitude just stinks. Do we really want to see this guy, under these circumstances, get rewarded with a big money fight against Eubank? Anyway, let me know what you thought about Eubank's performance against Smith and what you'd like to see moving forward.